My name is Kai Shin. And 3 years ago, the woman I loved looked me dead in the eyes and told me I had no future. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't even look guilty about it. She just sat across from me at that small corner cafe, the one we used to go to every Sunday, the one where I'd saved up for 2 weeks just to buy her that overpriced strawberry cake she liked, and she folded her hands on the table like she was closing a business deal. Kai, she said. I've been thinking about this for a long time. I remember the way the afternoon light caught her silver hair. How her pink eyes looked almost gentle, almost sorry, but not quite. We're going in different directions, she said. You're a good person. But good isn't enough. I need someone who's actually going somewhere. I stared at her. I have a plan, I said. I told you about the startup. The investors are interested, I just need another 6 months. You've said 6 months 3 times now. She picked up her coffee. Took a slow sip. Kai, I'm 24. I don't have time to wait for maybes. And that was it. No fight. No second chance. No door left open. She paid for her half of the coffee. She was always precise about that, never let me pay for everything, said it kept things balanced, and she left. I sat in that cafe for 2 hours after she walked out. The strawberry cake sat on the table between us, untouched. I paid for it. Ate every single bite alone. And I made myself a promise. Her name is Noral Young. At 24, she was the most put-together person I had ever met. Finance degree from the top university in the city. Sharp mind. Sharper tongue when she needed it. The kind of woman who had a 5-year plan written out in a color-coded notebook. I was her boyfriend for 2 years. I was a software developer at a mid-size company going nowhere fast, working 60 hours a week on a side project that everyone around me, including her, thought was a waste of time. She wasn't wrong that I was broke. She wasn't wrong that the startup was risky. She wasn't wrong about almost any of the facts. What she was wrong about was the conclusion. 18 months after she left me, the startup closed its first institutional funding round. 24 months after she left, we had 200 employees and offices in 3 cities. 30 months after she left, a major acquisition offer landed on my desk with so many zeros behind it that my accountant had to read it to me twice because I thought I was misreading it. I turned it down. I didn't want to sell. I wanted to build. And now, 36 months after Noral Young told me I had no future, I am worth $400 million and my company, Shin Digital, is the fastest-growing tech firm in the country. I should feel good about this. I do feel good about this. What I did not expect was the email that landed in my inbox last Tuesday from my head of HR. New executive assistant hire, confirmed start date Monday. Name, Noral Young. I read it 3 times. Then I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling for a long moment. Then I smiled. Not a happy smile. The kind of smile that a man wears when the universe hands him something he didn't ask for but finds he very much wants. Here is the thing about Noral Young that you need to understand. She is exceptional at what she does. Her resume was the best HR had seen in 6 months of searching. 4 years at a top consulting firm. Promoted twice. Left voluntarily to pursue something with more direct impact, which is exactly what an executive assistant role at a fast-growing tech company offers. She had no idea who owned the company. Why would she? I had deliberately kept my face off the company's public materials. No founder photos on the website. No speaking circuit appearances. No magazine profiles. The company name was Shin Digital, but Shen is a common enough surname that it didn't register as a flag. And I had changed. 3 years ago I was thin, wore cheap glasses, kept a beard because I was too busy to shave consistently, and owned exactly 2 dress shirts that I rotated. Now I spend 60 minutes a day in the gym. I wear contacts. I am clean-shaven every single morning. And my wardrobe was rebuilt from scratch by a stylist who charged more per hour than I used to make in a week. I look like a different person. Because in most of the ways that matter, I am one. So when my HR director confirmed the hire and asked if I wanted to meet the candidate before her start date, I said no. And when she asked if I wanted to review the file, I said I trusted her judgment. I already knew everything I needed to know. Monday morning. I arrived at the office at 7:30, which is my standard time. The building is 40 floors. My office is on the 38th. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 sides, city sprawling out below, the kind of view that still sometimes makes me stop for a second when the light hits right. I made my own coffee, sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and I waited. At 8:58, there was a knock on my office door. Come in. The door opened, and there she was. Noral Young. 3 years had been good to her, which I noted with the detached objectivity of a man who has trained himself not to feel things he doesn't want to feel. She was wearing a dark burgundy blazer over a white dress shirt, her silver hair down and slightly wavy. Pink eyes sharp and professional. That same composed expression I remembered, the one that said she had already assessed the room and decided how to handle it before she'd finished walking in. She crossed to my desk with clean, confident strides. "Good morning. I'm Nora Leong, your new executive assistant. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Shin." She extended her hand. I looked up from my laptop with the blankiest expression I have ever worn in my adult life. I let the silence sit for exactly 2 beats too long. Then I blinked. "Oh," I said. "Right. The new one." I shook her hand limply, made brief, slightly unfocused eye contact, then looked back at my screen. "Do you know how to make coffee?" The pause. "Yes. The last assistant kept burning it. It's a simple machine. There's instructions on the side." Another pause, slightly longer this time. "Of course. I'll take care of it." I nodded vaguely, already appearing to be absorbed in my work. She stood there for one more second. I could feel it, the tiny recalibration happening behind those sharp pink eyes, the slight downgrade of assessment, and then she turned and walked toward the small side kitchen attached to the assistant's workspace area. I waited until she was fully through the door. Then I allowed myself the smallest, most private smile in the history of corporate warfare. She has absolutely no idea. The first week was an exercise in restraint. Not for her. For me. Nora Leong was, as I had always known, exceptionally competent. She learned the systems in 2 days. She anticipated scheduling conflicts before I mentioned them. She managed my inbox with ruthless efficiency and had a gift for screening calls that wasted my time without being rude to the people making them. She was also, clearly, slightly confused by me. I had cultivated a very specific persona for this period. Not stupid, I couldn't make it too obvious, and frankly she knew me well enough once that she might clock a caricature. Instead I went for something more subtle, mild, slightly distracted. A man who had stumbled into success and wasn't entirely sure what to do with it. Someone who needed to be reminded of things. Who asked mildly baffling questions occasionally. Who sometimes stared out the window a beat too long during conversations. Harmless. Manageable. Not quite what she expected from a CEO, but not weird enough to raise flags. The coffee comment on day 1 had done its work. I saw it recalibrate her approach. She went from sharp professional to competent handler. Subtle but readable if you knew her the way I did. By Thursday of week 1, she had color-coded my calendar without being asked and left a printed summary on my desk with a post-it that said this might help. Flagged the 3 conflicts for your review. I read it. Noted that she had flagged exactly the right 3 items. I left a post-it back. "Thanks. Also, where are the staplers kept?" She found me at my desk 5 minutes later and placed a stapler in front of me without a word. Her face was perfectly professional, but I caught the microscopic twitch at the corner of her mouth. Not amusement. Something closer to fond exasperation. There it is. That was the face she used to make when I asked her where my phone was while I was holding it. She didn't know she was making it. She didn't know why she was making it. To her I was just a mildly endearing idiot boss. But something in her muscle memory recognized the pattern. I filed that away. Her name was Elena Park. She arrived on Wednesday of week 2 in a white blazer and heels that cost more than most people's rent, and she walked into my office without knocking. That alone told me everything. Elena Park was the heir to Park Industries, one of our largest B2B clients. She was 26, aggressively beautiful, and had decided approximately 2 months ago that she was interested in me. I was aware of this because she had told me directly at a client dinner, in front of several other people, which was either confidence or a complete absence of social filters. Possibly both. "Mr. Shen," she said, setting a very expensive box of macarons on my desk. "I was in the building for a meeting. Thought I'd stop by." "Ms. Park." I looked at the macarons. "You didn't need to." "I wanted to." She sat down across from me uninvited and crossed her legs. "Are you free for lunch? I have a call at noon." "After the call." I was about to respond when the door opened and Nora walked in with a document folder she'd been sent to retrieve from legal. She stopped when she saw Elena. Assessed the scene in approximately 1 second. Kept her face perfectly neutral. "Mr. Shin, the Harlow contracts you requested." She set them on my desk. "Should I reschedule your 1 o'clock to accommodate lunch plans?" The question was directed at me. But Elena answered. "That would be wonderful." "I'll be back by 1:15, I said, cutting across. No need to reschedule. Elena's smile didn't waver, but her eyes moved to Nora with the precise, calibrated look of a woman taking note of a potential variable. Nora held the gaze for exactly 1 professional second and then looked back at me. I'll note it. Anything else? That's all. Thank you. She left. Elena watched the door close. Your new assistant? Yes. She's very... Elena seemed to search for the word. Efficient. That's what assistants are for. Elena smiled and reached across the desk to push one of the macaron boxes toward me. Try the rose one. I had them made specially. I looked at the macaron. I looked at Elena. I'm allergic to rose extract, I said, which was completely false. Elena's smile froze for just a moment. Oh, she said. I didn't know that. Most people don't. I closed the contract folder. I'll see you at lunch, Miss Park. She left looking like she'd won something which she hadn't, but I let her have it. The moment she was gone I stood up, walked to my door and opened it. Nora was at her desk, typing. Nora. She looked up. Next time Miss Park comes by without an appointment, I'm in a meeting. The pause. Every time. Something moved behind her eyes. Not quite a smile. Not quite satisfaction. Something quieter than both. Understood, she said, and went back to typing. It happened first on a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks in. I had a board presentation running long and sent Nora a message asking her to push my 4 o'clock. She handled it, and when I finally emerged from the boardroom at 4:45, she had a coffee waiting on my desk, the right temperature, made exactly the way I took it, which I had mentioned exactly once in passing on day 2. I sat down. Picked it up. You remembered, I said mostly to myself. She was organizing documents at the side table and didn't look up. You mentioned it on your second day. Strong, no sugar, 30 seconds off boil. I looked at her. Most people don't catch things like that. She did look up then. A brief glance, professionally neutral, but there was something in it that wasn't quite professional. I pay attention, she said simply, and went back to her work. I drank the coffee. It was perfect. I hated how much I noticed that. The problem with the plan, and I had known this going in, which is why I had called it a plan and not a guarantee, was that Nora Leong in person was not the same as Nora Leong in memory. Memory had preserved her as the woman who left. Cold. Calculating. Choosing utility over feeling. Reality was more complicated. She stayed late without being asked on the nights when deadlines were tight. She learned the names of every person on my core team within the first week and used them correctly, which sounds small but isn't. Most new hires at her level treated support staff as background furniture. She pushed back on me, carefully but clearly, when she thought I was wrong. The first time she did it I had given her a mildly incoherent instruction about a scheduling conflict, and she had looked at me for a moment and then said, very politely, I think if we do it that way we'll lose the Hong Kong window entirely. Would you like me to look at an alternative? I blinked at her. Sure, I said. She came back 15 minutes later with 3 options, each with a clean pros and cons breakdown. The second option was the one I would have chosen myself. I picked the second option. She nodded and went to action it. I spent the next 10 minutes staring at the door she had closed behind her. The woman I remembered had been sharp. But this version had 3 more years of edges on her, and they were the refined kind, not sharper for the sake of sharp, but shaped into something precise. I had come into this with a plan for a game. I had not fully accounted for the possibility that the game would be interesting. Elena Park sent flowers to the office on a Friday. A very large arrangement. White roses and orchids. With a card that said simply looking forward to seeing you at the Park Industries Gala next week. They arrived at Nora's desk first, because everything came through her. I watched from my office door, which I had left open a crack. Nora looked at the arrangement. Read the card. Set it on the corner of her desk, not on mine, which is where it was presumably intended, and picked up her phone to add the gala to my calendar. She did not bring the flowers into my office. When I came out 20 minutes later and saw them still on her desk, I stopped. The flowers. She looked up. Ms. Park's assistant confirmed they were meant for you. I've added the gala to your schedule. I assumed you'd want them in your office, but I can arrange for them to go elsewhere if you prefer. I looked at the flowers. Then at her. Put them in the lobby, I said. Flowers in the office distract me. Of course. She picked up her phone to call building services. Then paused. Should I send an acknowledgement to Ms. Park? Send a thank you. Professional. Noted. She started to dial, then stopped again. Almost to herself quietly, white roses. I looked at her. She caught herself and glanced up. Professionally blank. Sorry. Nothing. I'll handle it. She turned back to her call. I walked back to my office. White roses. That was what I had given her. On our 6-month anniversary. A small bunch from the street market because I couldn't afford the florist, but I had picked every one by hand. She had put them in a glass on her window ledge and they had lasted 2 weeks. She didn't remember. She couldn't. It was a coincidence, a fleeting association that had crossed her mind and been immediately filed away. But she had said it out loud, which meant something, somewhere, in the deep architecture of her memory, had stirred. I closed my office door, sat down, stared at the city outside my window for a long time. The Park Industries annual gala was held at the Grand Meridian Hotel on a Friday evening and was, by any measure, an event designed specifically to be seen at rather than enjoyed. I wore a black suit. No tie. The stylist had strong feelings about this and I had let her win. Nora had coordinated the logistics, car, arrival time, the pre-event briefing document she had prepared which listed every key attendee, their connection to Shin Digital, and 3 relevant conversation points for each. She had handed it to me that afternoon with a completely straight face. You don't have to use all of them, she said. But the Park Industries board chair tends to loop back to the same 3 topics, so those might be useful. I flipped through it. You put conversation starters in here. You mentioned last week that galas feel inefficient. This should help. I looked up at her. She looked back with that same precise neutrality. This is very thorough, I said. Something almost warm moved across her face. Almost. Gone in a second. That's the job, she said. I took the document. The gala was everything it promised to be, loud, glittering, full of people performing versions of themselves for each other. I worked the room with the briefing document fresh in my memory and found that Nora had been exactly right about the board chair. Elena found me at the 40-minute mark. She was wearing a gold dress that was engineered to be looked at and she knew it. She arrived at my side with 2 glasses of champagne and the easy confidence of a woman who had decided the evening was going a certain way. Mr. Shin. She handed me a glass. You came. You invited me. I wasn't sure you'd actually show up. She smiled. You're hard to pin down. Busy schedule. Your assistant keeps it very locked. A slight edge in her voice. Slight. She's quite protective. She's good at her job. Elena sipped her champagne, surveying the room. She's pretty too. In that quiet way. I said nothing. Elena glanced at me sideways. Does it ever complicate things? Having someone that capable around all the time? No. You've never been tempted to. Elena. I kept my voice even and pleasant. You invited me to a business event. Let's keep it there. She held my gaze for a moment, then smiled, smooth and unconcerned, like a woman who was recalculating rather than retreating. Of course, she said. Business. Absolutely. She drifted away to talk to someone else. I stood with the champagne and watched the room. 20 minutes later my phone buzzed. Everything okay? You've been there 90 minutes and the car is outside whenever you're ready. I looked at the message. Then I typed back, ready when you are. The pause. I'm outside. I stopped. I typed, you came? You forgot the signed contract copy for Chairman Lee. He's there tonight. Thought it might come up. I have it. I stood very still in the middle of a glittering ballroom full of important people. She had driven to the gala on a Friday night because she anticipated I might need a document. Not because it was required. Not because anyone told her. Because she paid attention and she thought ahead and she came. I walked out of the ballroom. She was in the lobby near the entrance, still in her work clothes, the contract folder in her hand. She looked slightly out of place against the black tie crowd flowing around her and entirely unbothered by it. She saw me coming and held out the folder. Chairman Lee is still inside, near the East Bar. His assistant confirmed he's staying another hour. I took the folder. Looked at her. You didn't have to come. I know. It's Friday night. I'm aware of what day it is, Mr. Shin. I held her gaze for a second longer than I needed to. Something shifted in the air between us. Well, barely there. The kind of thing you could talk yourself out of noticing. She looked away first. I'll wait for you outside, she said. Take whatever time you need. She turned and walked toward the exit. I watched her go. The contract folder was in my hand. I stood in the lobby of a very expensive hotel surrounded by people worth millions and I felt, for the first time in 3 years, something I had not planned for. Elena Park was not a woman who gave up easily. The week after the gala, she sent a lunch invitation through official channels, a business lunch, framed around a potential expansion of the Park Industries contract. Legitimate enough that declining it required an actual reason. I delegated it to my CO. She sent another invitation 3 days later, this time for a private dinner. Framed it as a discussion about a joint venture opportunity she wanted to explore. I declined personally that time. Politely. With a suggested alternative of a formal presentation to the full team. She sent me, the following Monday, a very detailed proposal for the joint venture. It was a genuinely good proposal. I noted this with respect and mild irritation. I forwarded it to the relevant team with instructions to evaluate it on merit. The next morning she appeared at the office again. Without an appointment. Nora met her at the reception before she reached my floor. I only know this because I heard about it afterward, from Elena, who came to my office slightly less smooth than usual. Your assistant, Elena said, sitting across from me, is very thorough. She is. She told me you were in an overseas call and couldn't be disturbed. I was. For 90 minutes? It ran long. I looked at her. Was there something specific you needed, Elena? The team received your proposal. Her jaw tightened very slightly. I wanted to discuss it personally. That's what the presentation meeting is for. My team will set it up. She looked at me for a long moment. You know, she said, most people in your position would be at least a little flattered. I'm aware of what you're doing, I said, keeping my tone even. And I respect it. But it's not something I'm interested in. Why not? I picked up my coffee. That's not a question I'm going to answer, Elena. She stood up, smoothed her blazer, picked up her bag. At the door she turned back. Is it her? I met her gaze without expression. Send my regards to your father, I said. She left. Later that afternoon I was reviewing documents when I heard raised voices near the assistants area. Not loud, but sharp. I got up and opened my office door. Elena was still in the building. Apparently she had gone to the restroom and looped back, and she was standing at Nora's desk. I just think it's interesting, Elena was saying, her voice smooth and careful and carrying a very precise edge, that Mr. Shin's calendar suddenly became completely inaccessible after I expressed interest. Nora looked up at her from the desk. His calendar reflects his schedule, Nora said. Even. If you'd like to arrange a formal meeting, I can find the next available slot. I'm sure you can. Elena smiled. You seem very dedicated to the job. Is it the work you're committed to, or? Ms. Park. Nora's voice didn't rise. But something in it changed. A kind of quiet steel under the surface. I manage Mr. Shin's schedule and his access because that's what he asked me to do. If you have a concern about business access, you're welcome to raise it formally. But I'd ask that you keep this professional. Elena held her gaze for a moment. Then she smiled, a real smile this time, not the calculated kind, and said, You're good. Thank you, Nora said. Have a good afternoon. Elena left. I stood in my office doorway. Nora looked up and saw me. The pause. I'm sorry if that was overstepping, she said. It wasn't. I looked at her for a moment. Thank you. She nodded once and went back to her screen. I went back to my desk. My chest felt strange. I chose to ignore it. It rained on a Thursday in the 5th week. I know it was Thursday because I had a 7 o'clock dinner with 3 investors that I was mildly dreading, and the rain made the traffic worse, and my driver called at 6:45 to say he'd be 20 minutes late. Nora was still at the office. She was always still at the office, and when I came out of my office with my jacket and the news about the car, she was already on her phone. I'm calling a backup, she said, not looking up. It's fine. I'll take a cab. In this rain you'll wait 30 minutes for a cab. I have a contact at a car service. She was already talking into the phone. Yes, 38th floor lobby, 10 minutes? Perfect. She hung up. 10 minutes. I stood there. You have a contact at a car service. You travel a lot. It seemed useful. She started packing up her desk. I'll walk down with you and make sure they have the right address. We rode the elevator down together in the kind of silence that isn't uncomfortable but is aware of itself. In the lobby she checked her phone for the car confirmation. I looked at her. 3 years ago I used to meet her after work on Thursdays. It was our standing date. Nothing fancy, just whatever we could afford, which was usually a noodle place 2 blocks from my apartment that she pretended was beneath her but always finished her bowl. She was wearing the same slight frown she always wore when she was concentrating. The small one, between her brows. I used to smooth it out with my thumb and she would roll her eyes and call me an idiot. Cars here, she said. I realized I had been staring. I looked at the entrance. A black car was pulling up. Right, I said. Good. I walked toward the door. Then stopped. Turned back. Have you eaten? She blinked. Sorry. It's 7 o'clock. Have you eaten? I'll grab something on the way home. On the way home in this rain. She looked at me with the mildly exasperated patience of a woman who has decided her boss is occasionally baffling. I'll be fine, Mr. Shin. I looked at her for one more second. There's a good ramen place 2 blocks west, I said. They're fast. Good in the rain. The pause. Okay, she said. I nodded. Walked to the car. I didn't look back. But I knew, because I know her, that she stood in the lobby for a moment longer than she needed to. The next morning there was a container of ramen takeout on my desk when I arrived. A post-it, the place you mentioned was good. Got extra for the office since you were out late. Hope the dinner went okay. I sat down. Stared at the container. Opened it. It was the same order I always used to get. Spicy broth, soft egg, extra green onion. She had no way of knowing that. It was a coincidence. A lucky guess. An accident of memory with no origin she could name. My hands were very still on the desk. I stayed like that for a while. Then I picked up the chopsticks and ate. 6 weeks in. She had started doing something I noticed on a Tuesday. When she brought documents to my desk, she set them on my right side, not the left. Because my coffee was always on the left and I had never told her to do this, she had simply watched long enough to map it. When I was in a meeting she didn't like, she would send me a message that just said call available as exit if needed with no other context, because she had learned to read which meetings I found genuinely useful versus performatively necessary. When I worked late she didn't leave until I did. She never said this was what she was doing. She just found reasons to stay busy at her desk. I had watched all of this from behind the performance of being mildly oblivious. And I had noticed something. The things she did for me, the way she anticipated, the texture of her attention, it was not generic. It was specific. It was shaped to me. She thought it was professionalism. She thought she was just very good at her job. She was very good at her job. But that wasn't what this was. This was a woman who remembered things she didn't know she remembered. Kai Shin, broke, bearded, bespectacled Kai Shin, had left fingerprints all over the person she was now, in ways she couldn't trace or name. And she was falling for a man she didn't know was him. I sat with that for a long time. I had come into this with a plan that was clean and satisfying in its architecture. Let her believe she was working for an ordinary man, let her feel the irony of the situation, and then at the right moment, unfold it. Pull back the curtain. Let her see exactly what she walked away from. The plan had not changed. But the feelings I was watching grow in her, the flush of pink when I said something unexpected, the way her voice changed register slightly when we were alone versus when others were in the room, the post-it notes that had started coming with small dry jokes tucked in, those hadn't been part of the plan. And neither had the fact that I didn't entirely hate any of it. Elena made one more move. She came to the office on a Wednesday morning with a revised proposal, printed, bound, personally delivered, and insisted on presenting it to me directly. I agreed to 15 minutes. She presented the proposal in 12. It was genuinely solid and I told her so. Then she said, I'd like to take you to dinner. Not business. Just dinner. I looked at her. I thought about what I was going to say. And then I heard from outside my office door, the very quiet sound of a keyboard going completely silent. Nora was at her desk. The wall between us was not thick. She had heard the question. She was waiting for the answer. I looked at Elena. I appreciate that, I said. But no. Elena held my gaze for a moment. Then she nodded, once, with the grace of a woman who knows when a decision is final. The proposal stands regardless, she said. On its merits. I know. We'll be in touch. She left. 30 seconds of silence. Then Nora's keyboard started again. I went back to my work. Neither of us mentioned it. It was the 7th week. We were working late on a product launch timeline. The kind of night where the office empties out floor by floor until it's just the light above my desk and the glow from her monitor through the open door. She had come in around 9 to go over the final version with me. We sat at the round table in my office rather than across the desk. It was more practical for documents, and worked through it section by section. At some point the conversation shifted from the timeline to the launch event itself, and I made an offhand comment about the venue she'd recommended. It's good, I said. You've been there? Once, she said. A few years ago. Someone I knew had a work event there. She was looking at the document when she said it. I watched her profile. Someone. An ex. She didn't look up. It was a long time ago. I said nothing. She made a small note in the margin and moved on. If we do the East Room, we get an additional 200 capacity, which helps with the investor list. Was it serious? I said. She looked up. I kept my expression mildly, vaguely curious. The harmless boss making small talk. She studied me for a moment. Then she looked back down. Yes, she said. For a while. What happened? The pause. I ended it. She said it evenly. But there was something behind the evenness. A tiny weight that she was carrying very carefully. I thought it was the right call at the time. And now? She was quiet for a moment. I don't know, she said. And then quieter, sometimes I wonder if I got it wrong. The room was very still. I looked at the side of her face. The slight tension in her jaw. The way she was holding the pen a fraction too tightly. What made you think you might have gotten it wrong? I said. She shook her head slightly. It doesn't matter. It was a long time ago. She clicked the pen. East Room or the West Terrace? I let it go. East Room, I said. We went back to the timeline. But the air in the room had changed slightly, like a window had been opened and then closed, and the temperature hadn't quite returned to what it was. She left at 11. At the door she paused and turned back. Mr. Shin. I looked up. The person I mentioned. She held the doorframe lightly. He used to. She stopped. Shook her head. Never mind. It's nothing. Good night. Good night, I said. She left. I sat in the empty office for a long time after that. She had almost said something. She had pulled it back. But she had been looking at me when she started to say it. Not at the room. Not into the middle distance. At me. Something in her, something she couldn't name and hadn't yet connected, was trying to tell her what her eyes couldn't recognize yet. And I sat there with the city lights below and the weight of what I was carrying, and for the first time in 7 weeks I asked myself honestly whether the plan was still what I wanted. She had said, I wonder if I got it wrong. I held on to that for a long time. It started with a photograph. There is one photograph of me from before, one that exists in a public space, posted years ago on a university alumni page that nobody had thought to remove. In it I am 22, wearing a cheap button-down, with the beard and the glasses and the look of someone who has just been told a mildly funny joke. I had forgotten about it. Nora found it by accident. She was researching my background for a press profile the communications team was preparing, a founder feature that I had reluctantly agreed to because the PR team had been asking for months. She was compiling biographical details and she went looking for early photos. She found the alumni page. I didn't know this had happened until she appeared in my doorway on a Tuesday afternoon with an expression I had never seen on her face. Not at work. Not in the 7 weeks I'd been performing harmless oblivion for her. The expression on her face was the one people wear when the ground has shifted under them and they are not yet sure if they are falling. She was holding her phone. I looked up from my desk. I had 1 second to decide. I chose to wait. Mr. Shin, she said. Her voice was controlled but there was a hairline fracture in it. Can I ask you something? Of course. She walked to my desk. Placed the phone face up in front of me. The alumni photo. I looked at it. I looked at her. Where did you find that? I said. Neutral. Mildly curious. Alumni database. For the press profile. Her eyes were on my face. Reading it with an intensity that she was barely managing to keep professional. This is you. That's from about 8 years ago. You looked. She stopped. I waited. You looked different, she said carefully. People change. She picked the phone back up. Stared at the photo. Her jaw worked slightly. I knew someone, she said. Very quietly. Who looked like this. The room was very still. I'm sure lots of people looked like that 8 years ago, I said. She looked up at me. And I saw it happen. The moment the wall between what she knew and what she felt developed its first real crack. She wasn't there yet. Not fully. The conscious mind hadn't assembled it into language yet. But some deep structural part of her had clicked, quietly, irrevocably, and she knew, before she knew, that something was wrong with the story she'd been living for the past 8 weeks. Yes, she said. Of course. She picked up the phone. Walked back to her desk. I watched her go. I opened my desk drawer. Inside, underneath a folder I never opened, was a photograph of my own. The two of us at a street market 3 years ago, her holding a bag of tangerines, me standing slightly behind her, both of us laughing at something the camera had caught us mid-laugh. I had put it there on day one. Not as a prop. Not as part of the plan. Because I had wanted one thing from before in the room with me. I looked at it for a long time. Then I closed the drawer. She didn't say anything for 2 days. She went about her work. Precise. Professional. All the same rhythms and patterns. But she was looking at me differently. Not with recognition, not yet. With something more like a question she couldn't quite form. I noticed her studying my hands once. Another time she started to say something and stopped mid-sentence, as if she had lost the thread of it. On Thursday she brought my coffee and set it down and then just stood there for a moment. "Are you originally from the east side of the city?" she said. I looked up. "No," I said. "Why?" "No reason." She shook her head. "Sorry. Never mind." She left. I picked up the coffee. She was looking for him. She didn't know that was what she was doing. She was following a trail of small instincts that felt familiar in ways she couldn't justify, asking questions that her conscious mind was framing as random but weren't. She was almost there. I had not planned what to do when she got there on her own. Friday morning. She was at her desk when I arrived. Earlier than usual, she was sometimes first in now, which she hadn't been in the first few weeks. She had a photograph on her desk. Printed. Sitting beside her keyboard. I stopped. I couldn't see it clearly from across the room. But something about the size of it, the way she glanced at it when she heard me arrive and then very carefully placed a folder on top of it. I walked to her desk. She looked up. I looked at the folder. "What's under that?" I said. The pause. "Nothing important." "Nora." My voice was different when I said her name that time. I hadn't planned for it to be. But something in the past 8 weeks had worn through the performance and what came out was just my actual voice, saying her actual name, the way I used to say it. She heard it. I watched the color drain from her face. Her hand was on the folder. Slowly she lifted it. Underneath was a photograph. The same alumni photo. Printed. And beside it, something she had found somewhere. I would learn later it was a startup profile from 4 years ago, a small tech blog feature that had used a photo of me at my desk without the beard, younger, clearer, mid-laugh. She had put them side by side. She was looking at me, and I could see on her face the exact moment the last piece landed. The shape of my jaw. The way I held my coffee. The habit I had of tapping the desk twice before I spoke. The ramen order. The way I said her name. She had assembled it piece by piece without knowing she was doing it, and now it was assembled, and she was staring at it, and she was staring at me. "Kai," she said. "Not Mr. Shin." I stood very still. "How long?" she said. Her voice had gone very quiet. "How long have you known?" "Since before you started," I said. "I saw your application." The blood came back to her face, but it came back wrong. It came back as something hot and complicated. "You let me," she stopped. Swallowed. 8 weeks. "You let me work here for 8 weeks without saying?" "Yes." "Why?" I held her gaze. "Because I wanted to see," I said. "See what?" I said nothing. She stood up. "See if I'd recognize you? See if I'd feel guilty? Was all of it, was this a game to you?" "Not all of it," I said. "Which part wasn't?" I thought about the ramen container. The post-it notes. The quiet satisfaction of her voice when she called me on a scheduling conflict and turned out to be right. "The last few weeks," I said. "Less game. More. Don't." She picked up her bag. Her hands were not entirely steady. "Don't do that." "Nora. You made me feel like an idiot," she said. 8 weeks of me thinking I was doing a good job and all along you were doing a good job," I said. "That part had nothing to do with it." "It had everything to do with it. You're telling me you hired me knowing who I was. You sat across from me every day and watched me not know who you were and you thought that was acceptable?" "No," I said. "I thought it was a plan. Those aren't the same thing." She stared at me. I had one thing left to say and I said it. "You told me I had no future." My voice was even. "You were very sure about that. I wanted you to see what the future actually looked like." The room went very quiet. She looked at me for a long time. Her jaw worked slightly. "And now," she said, "you've shown me. So what? You win." I thought about her saying I wonder if I got it wrong. I thought about the post-it notes. I thought about her standing in a hotel lobby on a Friday night in work clothes because she thought I might need a contract. I thought about all of it. And then I thought about what I had told myself I wanted, back in that cafe, sitting with an untouched strawberry cake. "I had a plan for this part," I said. "I was going to end it differently." What does that mean? It means the plan changed. She waited. I'm not walking away, I said. I thought I was going to. I was very sure about that too. The pause. Turns out I was wrong. I had been invited, months before any of this, to speak at the National Technology Summit the following week. It was a large event. Televised. Industry-wide attendance. I had initially planned to use it as the moment. The public reveal. Kai Shin, founder of Shin Digital, formerly the nobody with no future, on a stage in front of every person in our industry. I had planned to mention, in passing in the Q&A, that I'd had people doubt me along the way. That the most useful thing those doubts had done was make the work feel necessary. I had not planned to name her, but I had planned the shape of it. The quiet satisfaction of the room putting things together. The plan had changed, but the event had not. I arrived at the summit alone. I had not told Nora about the speech. She had coordinated the logistics from the outside without knowing what I was actually going to say. The room held approximately 600 people. Press in the back. Industry leaders at the tables. The kind of room where things said publicly become permanent record. I took the stage. I gave the talk I had prepared, about building from nothing, about the value of long timelines, about what it takes to believe in something when the people around you don't. At the end, in the Q&A, a journalist asked the question I had been waiting for. Who are the people who shaped you most in building this company? I looked out at the room. Nora was not there. She hadn't been required to attend. I thought about saying her name. I thought about what that would do. To her. To us. Whatever us meant now. I thought about her voice saying I wonder if I got it wrong. And I made a decision. The people who believed in me, I said. And the ones who didn't. Both groups were useful. One built the fire. The other made sure it kept burning. I stepped back from the microphone. The room applauded. I walked off the stage. She was waiting in the corridor behind the stage. She had come after all. She was in the same burgundy blazer as her first day. Standing with her bag over her shoulder and her hands loose at her sides, which was how she stood when she wasn't sure what she was walking into. I stopped. You came, I said. I watched the live stream from the car. She looked at me. Then I drove over. I waited. That was about me, she said. The fire line. Some of it was. She was quiet for a moment. I owe you an apology, she said. I've owed it to you for 3 years. I was so sure I was right. She stopped. I was wrong. I was completely wrong and I'm sorry. I looked at her. I know, I said. Is that enough? She asked. Is that? I don't know yet, I said. The pause. Okay, she said. Quietly. That's fair. We stood in the corridor behind a stage that had held 600 people and the air between us was full of everything 3 years contains. The plan was to walk away, I said. After the reveal. I had it very clearly mapped out. What happened to the plan? You happened to the plan. I looked at her directly. You came to a hotel on a Friday night with a contract nobody asked you to bring. You remembered how I take my coffee on day 2 and you never mentioned it. You went to a ramen place because I said it was good in the rain. She was very still. Those are small things, she said. They're not small, I said. You know they're not small. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, what do you want, Kai? And I said the only honest thing. I don't know yet, but I know I'm not done. 3 months later, Shin Digital made the front page of every major business publication. Not for the revenue numbers, though those were notable. For the announcement of a new executive hire, Director of Strategic Operations. Her name, printed clearly in the press release, was Nora Leong. At the small press event held afterward, a journalist asked how they had met. I looked at Nora. She looked at me. There was a very brief pause in which a great deal passed between us silently. She came highly recommended, I said. Nora kept her face completely straight. He needed a lot of help, she said. With the coffee machine. The room laughed. I did not look at her again. But under the table, her hand found mine. And I held it.